Hello, and thanks for joining me for another UK episode of Lights Out. I'm your hostess with the mostest ghosties, Sylvia Schultz. In this episode, we're going to visit one of my favorite places in England, the town of St Albans. Lace up your walking shoes and let's go Lights Out. The town, some 20 miles from London, is named after Alban, the first British saint. History tells us that he lived there sometime during the 3rd or 4th century, at a time when Christians were facing persecution. Alban met a priest who was fleeing for his life and sheltered him in his home. He was so impressed with his guest's humility and manner that he converted to Christianity. When the authorities arrived to search Alban's house for the fugitive, he put on the priest's cloak and presented himself to the pursuers in place of his guest. He was then sentenced to endure the punishments that were to be inflicted upon the priest unless he renounced his newly found faith. Alban refused and was executed. This is the story we have from Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People. Later legends embellished Alban's story. One tale recounts that after his execution, his head rolled downhill, and a well sprang up where it stopped. But before it was St Albans, this was the Roman city of Verulamium. It was the second largest town in Roman Britain. Only Londinium was bigger. Around AD 50, it was granted the rank of municipium, which meant that its citizens had Latin rights. The town thrived until AD 61, when Boudicca of the Iceni tribe turned her fury on it. Boudicca's husband, Prasutagus, had been the chieftain of the Iceni and an ally of Rome. When he died, he left his kingdom jointly to his 2 daughters and to the Roman Emperor Nero. But the Romans seized the whole thing for themselves, and when Boudicca called them out on it, she was brutally flogged, and her 2 young daughters were raped. When she healed, she gathered her people together, along with the Trinovantes, who were allies of the Iceni. They went on the warpath, with Boudicca at the head of an army 120,000 strong. The rebels first attacked Camalodunum. A temple had been built here to the Roman Emperor Claudius, and the locals had been expected to pay for it. This caused a lot of resentment towards the Romans. The governor of Britain, Suetonius Paulinus, heard of the uprising and hurried his troops to the capital, Londinium. He arrived at London before Boudicca, but, realizing that he was outnumbered, decided to abandon the town to the rebels. When the Iceni and Trinovantes reached the city, they tortured and killed anyone who remained, then burned Londinium to the ground. Close to Londinium, to the northwest, was the town of Verulamium. Boudicca's rebels attacked here too. It's unclear how bad the devastation was, but in 1996 and 1997, excavations in St Albans, in the center of the Roman town, revealed a layer of black ash that dated to 60 to 65 AD. Roman historians wrote that around 80,000 people were killed by the rebels. Boudicca and her warriors had no interest in taking Romans as prisoners. They just wanted to slaughter the invaders. Suetonius and his troops made a desperate stand. The Romans were badly outnumbered. Nearly 10,000 Roman troops faced off against 230,000 rebels. But Boudicca's army was crushed. Britannia remained a solidly Roman colony. But even today, 2,000 years later, the name of Boudicca represents British strength and fortitude against oppression. Verulamium was rebuilt and later became St Albans. It's now a popular tourist destination, being so close to London. Paul Adams, our native guide, kept up a running commentary as we walked through the streets.
The building on the corner is called the Gables. at least two apparitions seen in there: a figure of an evil-looking man and a figure of an old woman doing embroidery.
Oh, neat.
In
So
there.
that would be on the main floor or
Yeah,
upstairs?
up on the top floors.
Top
Yeah,
floors,
yeah,
okay.
Ah,
yeah. I
okay.
think there was like a sewing shop up there at one time.
Okay.
Ah.
And yeah, two figures seen in that place.
Completely unrelated, but are those spikes there to keep pigeons from
Yeah,
nesting
they are.
there?
Yeah, they are. Yeah. There's not much known about those figures in there, but that's a tradition that there was the evil-looking man and the woman doing embroidery.
Okay.
Yeah, so we head down into the high street. Amalgamation of two medieval hostelries, the Swan and the George, and in the mid 1450s was part of Sopwell Priory, and became known following the restoration in 1660. The hostelry became known as the King's Head, and by 1790 it had ceased operating as a public house and had become divided into two private dwellings. Later, the shop premises were opened on the ground floor, and the former King's Head became a candle factory. In the early 1900s, the building was divided into an antique shop and a photographic portrait studio. Then a surgical supplies business operated out of it, and in the early 1960s it was converted into a pub.
Okay.
So, and this building is haunted by a ghost known as the Shadow, shadowy figure seen to have followed staff about as they have cleaned up the bar area after closing time. And the apparition's identity is unknown, although there have been several suggestions ranging from a former landlord to a casualty from the First Battle of St Albans. And also, as well as the Shadow, a more substantial but equally unidentifiable apparition has been reported from the Tudor Tavern.
Oh, certainly.
That's a dark-haired, bearded man wearing a ruffled Elizabethan-style costume who appeared briefly seated at a table drinking a glass of ale, and that was witnessed by a manager. So there's also been like poltergeist type movement of objects in there at all. That's quite a haunted building, that one. Yeah, it's cool.
Neat.
So it's a High Square now. What was it back when it was being haunted? It was called what?
It was originally called the King's Head.
The King's Head.
King's Head, yeah. Verulamium Cottage, and this is where a late 18th century cottage where the appearance of a monk-like figure in the early part of the 1900s has been reported. In 1903, the Skeet family moved into one of the houses shortly before the birth of their son Francis, and he went on to become a noted English glass painter. And one evening, the Skeet's Swedish maid Hilma was retiring to bed when she was overcome by an invisible force that pinned her against the wall of the stairwell and at the same time extinguished the candle she was holding. In the dim half-light, the frightened girl became aware of a cowled figure that seemed to step out from the nearby wall and began to speak in a tongue that she was unable to understand. The vision lasted for a few seconds before it and the mysterious pressure holding her against the wall vanished. Following night, Hilma awoke in the early hours of the morning and again saw the same monkish apparition standing at the foot of her bed. Whether the figure spoke a second time is unclear, but there was apparently enough moonlight filtering in through the bedroom window for her to make out the shape of a distinctive metal medallion hanging around the apparition's neck. As before, the figure quickly faded away and the young Hilma found herself alone in the room. Most accounts of this haunting close with the mysterious language being identified as Latin and the design of the metal medal corresponding with that of a pilgrimage medallion given to visitors of the abbey during the Middle Ages. And there you are. So that's
Neat.
I'm not sure which one of the cottages that she went in, but it was one of these buildings here. Right. So the next one is there. We're going to go further down the hill into Fishpool Street. Fishpool Street.
Okay.
Fishpool Street is allegedly one of the most haunted streets in St Albans.
Okay, mind the steps down there.
Right.
Mind
Are we
the step there, Dale?
heading down the steps? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Go down here.
Should I be recording as we're walking down the street?
Yeah, you can do.
Alright, cool.
Yeah. Lots of haunted buildings down here. And phantom figures including a crying woman, man wearing a tall hat, and a vision of a horse-drawn carriage are said to haunt the roadway itself during the hours of darkness.
Cool.
So in Anglo-Saxon times, a royal fortified settlement known as the Borough of Kingsbury was established on land close to the Abbey of St Albans. The Abbey's over there.
Oh.
On the other side, behind those buildings.
Okay.
And a large fish pond, now long since gone, that at one time provided the inhabitants of Kingsbury with food, survives in the name of Fishport Street, which is where we are now, which winds its way along the northeast edge of the Verulamium between Romeland Hill and Branch Road. So we're heading towards the Red Lion, which is a haunted pub down here.
All right.
The first floor bedroom in the 17th century Lower Red Lion Inn is said to be haunted by the apparition of an unknown woman, as well as the unsettling sound of a crying child. The mysterious movement of bedsteads has also been reported, along with a shadowy figure said to appear on occasion in the ground floor bar area. Well, that's quite a good one. Yeah, we can have a little walk along here, and then we're going to walk along down there, and then we'll come back up this way and go down into the park.
Oh, okay.
I mentioned that there was there was a report in one book I read where the bed had kept moving and shaking in one of the houses down this road, and it turned out that it was actually him, and he'd had that experience in that house.
Oh, cool.
But he said to me, I said to him, "Oh, I've hardly." Everybody's here for the face painting and for the Halloween type stuff, the children's thing, and didn't really know that there was a book signing going on. And he said, "Oh, don't worry." He said, years ago he went into a place in London. Andy Warhol was there doing something. He was doing some artwork or something, and he had his silver wig on and everything. And he said that nobody knew who he was, and nobody really came up to him. So I thought, well, if people have blown out Andy Warhol, then I don't feel so bad not signing any books in St Albans, So that's
Hey, Mikey's watching.
Hey, Mikey, how you doing?
Hey, Mikey.
We're in St Albans, Mikey. We're walking towards. Those spots.
By a figure of a man in a tall hat and a coach and four coming along here at night as well. So,
Oh, cool.
So that's quite.
Down the sidewalk here?
Sorry?
Down this sidewalk?
Yeah. Coach and four at night and an apparition of a man in a tall hat walking down here. But yeah, we can split up now and go back up and then go down into the Verulamium Park.
Mikey says very cool.
Okay. Well, this is known as the Abbey Gateway.
Aha.
This is the Abbey Gateway. This is all that remains of a former Benedictine monastery that used to stand on the site. And this gateway was built in 1365. And following the dissolution of the monasteries, it was used for about 300 years as a prison.
Oh.
And that's from that sort of period that the alleged haunting seems to originate. Disembodied screams, seemingly psychic imprints of former inmates, together with the opening and closing of windows and possibly doors, are said to have been encountered in the past. But now it's now part of St Albans School, so it's actually a school building. And a former boss of mine who I used to work for at a firm of chartered surveyors in Hemel Hempstead, he went to school there, and he told me that he'd never heard anything about ghosts in this building at all. But there you go. But, yeah, it's an impressive looking building. This is the old Fighting Cocks. This is one of the this is the oldest pub in St Albans, and it's also got a reputation to be one of the oldest pubs in England, actually. 11th century building on foundations which go back to around AD 790. And some of this, a lot of this octagonal shape was built in as a bird fighting arena in the 16th century. You know?
We lost signal for a second. It's the oldest pub in...
Oldest pub in St Albans and one of the oldest public houses in England.
There you go.
And yeah, and this was built as a as a bird fighting arena in the 16th century. And apparitions of men dressed in brown monk-like habits have been seen coming out of the cellars in this building. In 2001, a member of the bar staff claimed to have seen a procession of robed figures emerging from the ancient cellar and crossed to one of the fireside tables where they seated themselves before fading away. The experience took place around 9:30 one morning, and the witness stated that the ghostly figures were only visible from the knee upwards. And the paranormal movement of objects has also been reported from this building from time to time.
An original floor.
That's right, yeah, like the Treasurer's house at York, where the Roman figures were seen walking through the cellar only from the knees up. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So we're going to go down into Verulamium Park now.
How many steps I've done these 4 days?
There is a sign on the side of Ye Old Fighting Cocks, reputed to have accommodated Oliver Cromwell for one night during the Civil War, stabling his horse in what is now thought to be the bar area. The underground tunnels of the inn providing useful bolt holes in troubled times. We are now entering Verulamium Park. Okay, I was wrong. It's not a stream going by here. It is actually a lake. It is the lake in Verulamium Park.
You've got the old city wall, part of the old city wall over there.
Ah, okay.
Not surprisingly, ghostly Roman soldiers are said to be heard tramping around here. From time to
Heck
time.
yeah, you know it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. Well, we'll head back up to the cathedral now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's only a quick stop unless you want to do a quick jog round. About the ghosts, the Roman soldier ghosts in Verulamium Park. There's one long-time St Albans resident who claimed to have had a number of supernatural encounters in Verulamium Park was the colourful John Mills, best known to many people as Ginger Mills. Originally from London and Pershore in Worcestershire, Mills, a former circus performer, arrived in St Albans in the late 1960s and for many years lived out of a camper van parked in various locations around the city. On one occasion, during the early hours of the morning and while walking around the ornamental lake, which is where we are now, Mills claimed to have heard the sound of marching feet and experienced a cold breeze as a phantom army of invisible Roman soldiers moved past him in the darkness. Whatever happened that night will now never be known for certain, as Mills died in the Worcestershire Royal Infirmary in February 2008, taking the secrets of the Verulamium ghosts with him.
I love it. And the cooing you heard during Paul's talking there was a lady, it was not me, although I wanted to. There's a lady walking past on her cell phone and cooing over the 2 little baby ducklings we saw paddling after Mama. There's swans on the lake and geese and ducks.
Very informative.
Calories, yes, I've burnt off
Oh, nice.
just on that bit that we recorded.
Right.
So,
I know I got up over 10,000 steps.
That's cool.
Okay, so I am reading the sign for Verulamium Park, St. Germain's Block. Verulamium transformed. In the early 5th century AD, the Roman legions were withdrawn from Britain as barbarian settlement within the borders of the Roman Empire increased. The largest markets for the economy of Roman Britain were lost, and change was inevitable. Anglo-Saxons and other tribes began to arrive in Britain. Verulamium seems to have continued as a smaller Romano-British enclave, eventually developing into a defended royal centre of the Saxons called Kingsbury. Building St Albans. By the 10th century AD, masonry from the town's buildings and walls was being robbed to provide material for the abbey and other church buildings. If you look at the abbey's 11th century tower, you can see that it is almost entirely built of Roman materials. This section of the town wall probably survived because it formed part of the enclosure of St. Germain's Chapel, built in the 12th century AD. So that is why it is referred to as St. Germain's Block. I'll get a picture of the details of this wall here. Okay. Pause here.
Go to the... I'm losing my words at the moment. Stage.
Oh, the
Yeah,
oh, okay. Yeah.
We actually went to play this year in the amphitheatre.
Oh, oh, neat. Bet that really gives you a sense of history and continuity.
Have a fruitful trip.
Thank you very much.
Head back to it.
Yeah.
And the ducks and the ducklings are all on the sidewalk now. We've run into them again.
Chanting.
Uh-huh.
And in the war, there was the Second World War. There was a fire watcher who claimed to have seen claimed to have heard the bells of the cathedral ringing. But at that time, the bells for safety had been taken out of the tower and were stacked at the base of the tower, so they couldn't have rung.
Oh wow!
And he went down and he claimed that he saw a procession of robed monks walking through the centre of the cathedral and vanishing through the screen door into the shrine of St Albans, which is inside the cathedral.
Aha.
They used to use the tower of the cathedral as a spot for fire watching.
Aha.
And the Luftwaffe used to use the tower of the cathedral as a navigation when they were flying over on bombing raids. That was one of the points that they picked out to know where they were. You know.
Oh my.
A coach coming up this hill turned into there, and in 1820, the Northampton coach turned off Holywell Hill and passed under the archway leading to the stable yard at the rear of the building. Elizabeth Wilson, who was riding on the roof, failed to duck her head and was struck and fatally injured.
Oh.
There is a possibility that she may be one of several ghosts that have been seen and felt in this old coach in over the years, and maybe the figure of a woman encountered on a number of occasions by both staff and guests.
Ah.
The death of Elizabeth Wilson is said to have been the inspiration for the death of Mrs. Jingle in Charles Dickens' novel The Pickwick Papers. There you go. Right, we can head up this way.
Well, picture.
Yeah, sure.
It's getting nice out today, you know.
This is the White Hart Hotel.
This one here. And that's had a haunted reputation going back to the 1940s when St Albans Council used to use it as offices.
Okay.
And there's frequent reports of a woman in a long grey dress walking around in the upper part of that building.
Okay.
Went back about 20 years ago. I went in there to inquire about extending a mortgage on the house, and I was talking about ghosts and things to one of the ladies there, and she said that they'd often seen. There was one particular corridor up there where there was you went down, and there was a little thing where there was a photocopier, and you went down there and there was no way of getting out. You went down to the corridor, it was like a dead end, and someone would often be passing the top of the corridor, and they would see someone just walk at the end into the area where the photocopier was, like a profile with like a grey outline, and they would go down there and there would be no one there, and there's no way anybody could get out from there. So that was seen. They said they saw it quite quite frequently in there.
What is it now?
Well, I'm not sure. When I went there, it was the Nationwide Building Society, like a bank, you know, building society. But
What's the name now? Saints and Sinners?
yeah, I don't know what that is.
It almost looks like a pub.
I'm not sure what that is.
I can't tell.
Oh, sounds like it. And
Mallinson House.
this is number 38 to 42 St Peter Street in St Albans. This is a late 18th century building, originally known as Donington House. For several years was the residence of a local surgeon, Dr. William Russell. After his death, his former home was briefly in the headlines when the sighting of an apparition at one of the windows one evening in 1872 drew a large crowd of sightseers, which eventually had to be broken up by the police. An article entitled "Ghost at St Albans," which appeared shortly afterwards in the Hert's Advertiser concerning the incident, is worth quoting in full. This is based on the transcription included by Thretscher and Carrington in St Albans Ghost Law. A ghost is a luxury we are seldom nowadays permitted to indulge in. St Albans, however, is fortunate in this respect, for on Sunday evening about 7 p.m, not by any means a ghostly hour, some imaginative person, while passing the Donington house occupied by the late Dr. Russell, saw or fancied he saw a figure wearing a white hat at one of the upper windows. He at once called the attention of passers-by, who appeared to be as equally credulous as himself, and soon a crowd of about 200 would-be ghost seers collected around the house, where they waited with the most exemplary patience for some 2 or 3 hours. Few, however, were favoured with another view of the ghostly occupant, although one old lady was most positive in her assertion that she had seen something. Others only heard taps at the window, while another of the crowd, more fortunate than the rest, actually heard the ghost speak, although what it said has not yet been transpired. It is to be regretted that this pleasing illusion should have been dispelled by some sceptical members of the police, who entered and examined the building. However, notwithstanding the most careful search of every part, they could not discover the slightest trace of the intruder, and subsequent investigation led to the conclusion that the house was entered from the back by someone intent on having a lark.
Aw, man!
It would seem that the building, closed and apparently empty following the death of Dr. Gardner, had garnered a local reputation as a haunted house. The sighting of a figure at the window was considered at the time to be both unusual and supernatural. Was this the ghost of William Russell's unnamed former butler, who is said to have committed suicide in an upper room of the house through guilt at being caught drinking his master's brandy? Or, as the St Albans police suspected at the time, a local youngster ghosting for a giggle? We will never know for sure. Just over 100 years later, Mallinson House was the scene of another allegedly ghostly experience when in 1977 a builder on the premises claimed to have seen the apparition of a legless man who passed him briefly on the staircase. So there you go. That's weird, isn't it? Like 200 people hanging around out here and looking up at that building. That's cool. Right, we can head on up further up. Sighting of an apparition took place in St Albans. In 1258, the figure of an old man with a long flowing beard is said to have appeared to an anchorite at the top of the church tower and prophesied the onset of a great famine that would spread across the country. The supernatural prophecy eventually came true, as widespread pestilence and famine are known to have afflicted many parts of the northern hemisphere around this time.
That's at the Parish Church of St Peter.
Where there's a haunted staircase, figure of a woman seen walking down the stairs in this building.
Okay.
Over the years. We're not too sure this year.
Ivy House.
Oh no, they do know who she is. Former occupants were both troubled and assisted here by the ghost of a murdered servant girl by the name of Meads. She was allegedly immured alive within the wall of the previous building to stand on the site as a brutal punishment for becoming pregnant by an unnamed member of the household, who chose to bury his indiscretion rather than pay maintenance. It is the spirit of the tragic chambermaid that in previous years has seemingly haunted the rooms and corridors of Ivy House, particularly the main staircase, where her presence has been often felt. Here the banister rail is said to have been kept mysteriously clean, even during refurbishment work when the entire building became coated with dust. There we are. In 1975, a manager returning one evening to collect some papers from his office saw the figure of a young blonde-haired woman in a white dress standing on one of the upper floor landings. The apparition glanced in the manager's direction before walking out of sight up the next flight of stairs, at which point the office worker, unnerved by his experience, turned and left. On another occasion, the same sad-faced looking figure was seen by several members of staff who had come into the office out of hours to decorate a Christmas tree. Again, the apparition was seen on the stairwell area of the building, where several cleaners are also said to have heard footsteps and other unusual noises. Well, there you are.
Our wanderings through the town brought us to the gorgeous cathedral of St Albans. Putting the paranormal aside for just a bit, we entered the church and soon encountered another very knowledgeable guide.
Yes.
I'm from Illinois.
Yeah, Midwest.
Yeah.
We're both from Illinois.
I'm careful to ask where people are from rather than assume anything. Canadians hate to be called Americans. New Zealanders hate to be called Australians. And in this country, when it comes to Yorkshire and Lancashire...
Well, we are absolutely enamored of all your accents. We're going up to Edinburgh a few days from now. So.
Yeah, on Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday,
Yeah.
okay.
You may just be able to understand them, okay? If you went across to Glasgow, it's a bit more difficult.
We're
I
hitting
see.
Newcastle as well on Friday, so there you go.
I've got no problem with that because I actually come from a Danish family. Danish is my first language.
Wow.
Oh.
And Geordie and Danish are so similar in the pronunciation.
Okay.
Is that so? My goodness, I could not tell that English was not your first language.
Thank you.
But, wow.
No, they used to say that fishermen from England's or Lincolnshire area and fishermen from Jutland in Denmark, if they met in the middle of the North Sea, they would each speak their own language, but they could understand each other perfectly.
Wow.
Wow.
That's cool.
That is neat.
But anyway, do you know the building at all?
No?
Right.
Will you tell us about it, please?
Yes, may I show you a couple of things?
Please do.
Down a bit, that's a group that's going round that place now. Yes, certainly.
Thank you.
Because a lot of people come in and carry on walking down.
Started to be built in 1977. It took till around 11.
But if we go down a little bit and then turn round,
Okay. Were these painted when I think they were painted?
800 years ago.
Goodness.
But what I also would like to show you is what I think
Yes,
is a rather splendid window.
Oh,
Goodness.
It's the American connection because we have the Stars and Stripes.
Well, so you do. Good heavens.
It's the First World War memorial window, went in 1925.
Ha!
And up at the top you've got the crests of the countries that fought on the Allied side. So you've got the Stars and Stripes first in the main window, first on the left, but also in the roundel up at the top.
lovely.
But Stars and Stripes as they were in 1918. 2 less stars than there are now, I believe.
Yes. Huh.
But yes, I must say, the Normans invaded this country 1066 and they started this building 1077, very shortly afterwards. But the Normans built it to here.
Okay.
150 years later, so many pilgrims are coming to the shrine of Alban, who is this country's first Christian saint, that they had to extend the building by these 4 bays, and people have learnt to build in the early English style. So you've got the pointed arches rather than the round arches, much more decorated stonework.
Huh. Okay.
This is St Christopher, patron saint of travellers. Normally it would be at the entrance to a church. The pilgrim would come into the church, say, "Thank you, St Christopher, for my safe arrival." But in Norman times, this was the entrance to the church.
There you go.
So that's why he's there. And then when this was the monastery, this was built as a church or a monastery, so an abbey church. In fact, the premier Benedictine monastery of this country. There used to be altars at each of these pillars, and we presume on the other side as well, where monks would say prayers for the souls of the departed, provided they made a suitable contribution. And then that side collapsed in 1323.
Oh.
And when they rebuilt it, they matched the early English style rather than the Norman. So the building is a bit of a mishmash.
It is.
So you're talking about the altar area collapse, or just
That side collapsed.
this side? Okay.
Collapsed all the way through.
The pointed arches
The po-
at the back there, aren't
Yeah,
they?
yeah, you got
Must
there.
have
Yes.
reconstructed this
That's right.
section.
Yeah, that's right. Rather than the round arches.
Right.
The screen is medieval, early medieval. But when we had the Black Death in 1349, the monks who were on the other side, and the ordinary people on this side, the monks were worried about the miasma of the ordinary people. So they doubled the height of the screen and closed the two doors. But the statues there, they came in 8 years ago,
Ah.
and they represent people who have given their life for their faith across the world and across the ages. So the very central figure is Alban himself.
Ah.
To his left as we look is the priest who converted him that we call Amphibulus. Now, because we're very ecumenical here, we are an Anglican church, but we have a Roman Catholic Mass once a week. We have a Russian Orthodox service once a month. We have a German Lutheran service once a month. Everybody is welcome. So we have Alban Rowe, who's a Roman Catholic martyred under a Protestant regime, and George Tankerfield, a Protestant martyred under a Roman Catholic regime.
Oh.
Elizabeth of Russia, sister to the last Tsar,
Ah.
murdered by the Bolsheviks the day after the Tsarist family, because the Bolsheviks were worried that she would form a centre of resistance to the Bolsheviks. Then we've got Oscar Romero, Bishop of San Salvador, murdered in 1980, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, murdered by the Nazis a week before the end of the Second World War. So it's people who've given their life for their faith across the world and across the ages.
I'm curious, how old is the pipe organ?
We've got 8,000 pipes in that organ. It's one of the largest organs in this country.
Wow.
And every 2 years we have an international organ festival that's coming up in August this year. Organists come from around the world in competition to play the organ here.
Nice, nice.
They have orchestral concerts with it as well?
We have a lot of music here, which is really what makes this place function, because the acoustics here are very good.
Okay.
The flat ceiling.
The Sanson Organ Symphony would sound amazing in here on play.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
On that.
I'm not a musician, but I'm sure you're right. Yeah. And then the monastery was closed 1539, and this end of the building was unused for 300 years. The people of the town bought the building to be used as a parish church, but they only used the Lady Chapel at the far end and the crossing. This end of the building was empty for 300 years, became derelict, open to the sky when the medieval timbers rotted and fell in. So what we're looking at there is actually a Victorian restoration. And then, because it had been restored, it then became the mother church of the Diocese of St Albans when that was created in 1877.
Isn't there a watching window, a little window?
We're here in the nave, the other side is choir stalls, then we have the high altar, then beyond that another screen, and then the shrine to Alban himself. And you're right, there is a medieval watching chamber for the monks to keep an eye on the pilgrims to make sure they didn't make off with the odd little bone.
So Alban's remains are in there, I mean, or...
The joke around here is that the bones of Alban have got more air miles than Richard Branson.
Okay. Okay.
When the Vikings invaded this country, allegedly his bones were taken to Ely Cathedral for safekeeping.
Okay.
When the Vikings were pacified, allegedly, I use that word allegedly specifically, that the bones came back here, but there was a bit of argument about that. I know at some time some of his bones were in the cathedral in Denmark, where my uncle lived, St Albans, St Albans Cathedral, in the island of Fyn in the middle of Denmark. And when this building was restored in the 1850s, and we don't know how they got there, Cologne Cathedral made a gift of one of Albans' bones back to his resting place here. What the bones were doing in Cologne, nobody knows.
And they just gave one back?
They gave just one back. I don't think there are very many. We have here the shrine to Alban. We're careful to say it's a shrine. Pilgrims have been coming here for 1,700 years. This is the oldest place in this country of continuous Christian worship.
Wow.
I won't go too close to the guide there because we'll start bouncing things. No. But if you look up at the springing point of the arches there, can you just see that there are 4 heads where the arches start springing up?
Yes.
There are 4 heads. The first one is the abbot, who would have been a very powerful person, the abbot of St Albans. The second one is the Queen of England. The third one is the King of England, Edward III, at the time of the Restoration. And the fourth one is Henry Wide, Master Mason. And Henry Wide put himself on a level with the abbot, the king, and the Queen of England.
Cheeky.
Bit cheeky.
Well, good on him.
Yeah. One-upmanship, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but I'm important, I'm powerful.
Yeah, cool.
No, so we've got St Christopher. We have Thomas a Becket, who has got nothing at all to do with St Albans. But when he was martyred 850 years ago, so many pilgrims were going off to Canterbury instead of coming here. The abbot said, let's have a picture of Thomas a Becket. Come here, you get 2 for the price of 1. You get Alban and you get Thomas a Becket.
Lovely.
And then a lot of Americans know more about Magna Carta than many English people do, because it's based on the Constitution. The first meeting in 1213 between the barons and the clerics, which led to Magna Carta, was in the chapter house here.
Oh my.
So Magna Carta, obviously they'd been discontent against the king, but the first proper meeting to discuss what to do about this awful king was here.
Nifty.
And the nave is really my dominion. Once I'm past that screen, I'm lost. But may I show you just one other thing?
Certainly.
We're very proud of our graffiti here. To the extent that someone has written a book about them.
Oh my goodness.
So this area collapsed in 1323 and was rebuilt. Now we think this must have been done by a medieval monk because their handwriting is so beautiful.
Oh.
It's a medieval Latin, and I'm told that it says Samson is having a laugh. It's a reference to Samson in the Bible pulling down the temple on the Philistines.
Wow.
The arches there, they are Norman, so 950 years old. The pillars up there are Saxon, so we think they came from Offa's Church on this site before the Normans arrived. So the pillars are maybe 1100 or 1200 years old. The bricks in the arches are Roman bricks that came from the city of Verulamium. So we're looking at bricks that are 1,800 years old.
Wow.
We have history here.
Thank you for joining me for a stroll through haunted St Albans and for enjoying the cathedral with us. In the next episode, I'll introduce you to one of my favorite English ghost hunters, the inimitable Harry Price. Fire up your recorders and spirit boxes and join me for a visit with one of England's original investigators. The next time we go, lights out.